Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today we'll be doing a review of the 2021 book by Kate Masur, Until Justice Be Done, America's First Civil Rights Movement from the Revolution to Reconstruction. Catherine Trust Masur, born the 7th of January 1971, currently based out of Evanston, Illinois. A protege of Ira Berlin, who acquired her PhD from the University of Michigan, Masur has taught history at Northwestern University for the majority of her academic career, focusing mainly on the Civil War era of the U.S. and how it intersected with the civil rights and women's rights movements. She has several other books to her name that are set in this era, but Until Justice Be Done is easily her first widely popular work, so much so in fact that it received a Pulitzer nomination last year. Going into this work, reading that fact was encouraging for me, and her collaboration with folks such as Henry Louis Gates, who I mentioned in my kind of slave narrative series just a little while ago, that reassured me that compared to African founders, which I just reviewed, this was going to be more engaging and more connected to contemporary ideas. And it definitely is very connected to contemporary ideas, but I think when people use that phrase, there is that kind of implication that it means grandstanding. And I don't think this book does that, and I don't think it's preachy in any sort of sense. While Masur is operating from a very traditional 21st century type of storytelling and framework, the history that she is describing is extremely document-based in the sense that not only does she rely very heavily on primary sources, she discusses those sources very explicitly in the writing and centers her discussions around those documents. I really like that approach, especially since she doesn't sacrifice narrative flow to discuss them. That's something that can be lost when people are discussing documents explicitly in text. This book has a lot of momentum to it throughout as it builds its story, builds its narrative from beginning to end. The story included is essentially a history of anti-slavery activism, both in the public sphere and the political sphere, and Masur's goal is to display scope. And what I mean by that is the amount of work and the amount of lobbying that it took to get the abolitionist agenda a wide audience is a pretty unsung piece of U.S. history on a wider level, and Masur breaks it down all the way from the early lobbying that made up a chunk of the constitutional debates in the late 1780s, as well as the general arguments surrounding citizenship for African Americans that continued well into the 19th century. As those arguments evolved, thanks to legal precedent and an increasing amount of African Americans became educated and literate and added their voice to the proceedings, the fights in the halls of Congress and the Supreme Court became increasingly volatile. More than anything else, I think seeing the history laid out in this book helped me appreciate, among other events, but this one specifically, the horrifying impact of the Dred Scott decision in the mid-1850s and just how much work, how much effort it seemed to reverse when it came to the whole issue of African American citizenship. And I came into this book knowing what I thought was a fair bit about the Dred Scott decision because of previous history classes and books that I'd read, but it is a special thing to be able to animate historical events that, in the case of Dred Scott, again, myself and most Americans have read about in history classes, and to be able to get the reader to understand the significance on an emotional level. Not only do you have the knowledge of what happened, but you see what was undone and affected because of it, and you have that emotional connection, and that's difficult to do. And there are several of those moments throughout this book. I think Masur's writing is engaging, maybe not the liveliest prose that you'll ever read, but again, it keeps the information moving without feeling like pure information dumping. It's a pleasant combo of informative and interesting, and I think that helps it maximize its audience while still turning out a work that has historical value. So especially for those folks out there who are looking to brushen up on your knowledge of the pre-Civil War era and how the anti-slavery movement really found its voice, I would recommend this incredibly highly. It's a valuable summary of an important period of history coming from an informed perspective, and I can't really say much else about it other than that. Please give it a read. And that's it. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more reviews are to come. Tell a friend as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.